I want to know about electric or unified consciousness.
We're going to get 3 days of electric consciousness. Wouldn't you like that? You know, sometimes it's the little bit of a push that it takes. I think there are a lot of people that are awakened up. If our timing is correct, and I think it will be, because this is supposed to be the doomsday hatch, remember? Remember what happened with Elenin. This is proof that there is intelligent guidance going on, that Elenin is under intelligent control. Because it changed course. Not just once, number of times. And worried the hell out of the powers that be. It turned out to be sentient life coming through of a high technology waving at us. And that was all it was.
Yeah, only very few did recognize it, though.
Yeah, well, that's because of the way hitters tried to turn it into something to be feared. The same is true with what's coming now. It's going to be even more dynamic or emphatic.
I told them to expect something different and to be aware that something different might happen.
Just waking people up to the potential is like pointing out something in the distance you might not have seen, plodding on in the usual fashion. There has been all kinds of build-ups to turn it into something that will strike fear and all kinds of timid speculation. First of all, once you experience the difference, what you're going to be able to do. Once you experience a difference, then you'll know what you're missing. Right? You don't know what you're missing now.
No, you don't know what you're missing.
So you'll know what you're missing. And we have to have enough duration of that, so I'm working on extending that.
Good.
And so you know what you're missing. Now, once you know what you're missing, once you'll know that the mechanics of being what your birthright gives you, you'll have a reason to address this. And even if that situation is lost, you will have a memory of how wonderful it was. So you have that much, right? You have, in effect, been awakened.
Yes.
You've been awakened, and you see the reality of what I've been talking about for a long time. You see the reality. It's brought home to you. It's going to be brought home to everyone. And so you're awakened, and when it's taken away from you again, you're going to say, I want it back. And I'm hoping that's when that healthy outrage, not go out and kill people, because you don't know who's going to come out on your side. There may be people that among the monsters that say, hey, we don't have a right to deny people something this wonderful, and this just might change everything for the better for everyone. And you don't know. But what it will do is show people how much more of a theater for their life they can have. Once you get this down and you know, I'm recovering history for you, or I'm helping to recover history. There's a magnificent alignment. You are going to have the past catch up with you at this point. Now, I'm not going to tell you more than that. You're going to have the past catch up with you, and you're going to be able to see into the future on the basis of the principle of inevitability with it, at least for a time. So when you have that, and there'll be no reason for you not to remember it, no matter what the monsters may try to do, because like I say, there are going to be people that are going to be among them, be implementers, be facilitators, are going to be among them saying, hey, this is new. I want to know more about it. Let's look at it this way. Many of these people that are serving this New World Order think and have been brought to believe that it was the only alternative to save the planet.
I was just thinking, you cannot unlearn what you have learned. If we are to be given something incredible.
I'll say this, for a lot of people, it'll be what they make of it. There'll be people that'll be in a frame of mind where it'll be magical. It'll be like a trip, only one that opens the mind and bears a lot of things. It'll be wonderful. And, the shaman What I like so much about the Mayan shaman, what I like so much about what he had to say, was that he was doing his best to reconcile it with modern science. Of course, it can't be, but it's not his fault it can't be. It's modern science's fault it can't be.
I read his book. It was very interesting. He's definitely started something interesting over there, and he has a lot of very good things to say.
Yeah. Well, he's a good man. He is trying to be a forward thinker. It's very hard when your base is, your ancestral beliefs and so forth. But the Mayans were an elegant people. I know that they got caught up in some awful things. But if you will bear with me a little, how much more awful are there things than what we're seeing our governments in England, United States, doing right now?
It was just a different time.
But the amount of victims, the amount of killings, the amount of maimings, of ruination of health and life, it's on the same scale. You are doing fine when everything you're about, whether it's exactly like you claim, still is beneficial to everyone they're dealing with. I know it's very difficult and incredible to accept many of the things I say, but bear in mind, everything that's incredible, everything that's extraordinary, I've been pressed to disclose under questions. It's not like I come out boastfully and lay it out as this or lay it out as that. And I just as soon have kept a lot of that to myself. But when I'm asked, I'm not going to dance around or I'm not going to back down or whatever. I'll tell people. And, of course, that loses a lot of people. But those people have a chance to consider possibilities they might not have otherwise, and eventually say, yeah, that doesn't sound so out of the question as it did when he said it. Because I want people to realize potentials that may lie in them, too. It's something that we overlook. But just because I knew what your ancestors were like doesn't mean I know the changes that may have occurred since then, and that may lead to you being vastly more enabled than them. We don't know, do we? I'd sure like to find out.
I think we all would.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Those that are aware that there is something more, something so much better.
Well, that's what I'm hoping will reach some of these people that are on the wrong track and get them more involved with us in our way of thinking. That's what I'm hoping. But, this period that's coming up from the 21st to the 25th roughly, and it may extend further, depending on what happens. If you build a rapid consensus, you know that it hangs around, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is more than a consensus. This is an atmosphere. And people say, I don't want this going away. I know this, that if you wake up just before midnight, it's going to be different.
Really?
It's going to be different. If you wake up just before midnight, if you really want to be on the cusp of...
Oh, I do.
Wake up just before midnight, and even the air will have a different taste.
The evening of the 21st, about 10 o'clock at night.
Just before you're turning into the 22nd.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything we can do to prepare?
Just try to let people know that it's coming. Sharing this with people by giving them the direction you have already will be a large part of it, because it's like a contagion in which the more involved there are, the more impacting it is.
Should we meet, like sit together, be together at that time in a large group or with friends?
I'll tell you, I think that if you can get people that you know and where you have your geodesic dome, if the weather isn't too bad, go out, build a bonfire, sit around it, and at 10 o'clock, be quiet for 30 minutes or so, and then talk about what each of you has experienced.
Great.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I think that's what I would do.
Which reiterates what the shaman said, have pen and paper ready.
Yeah.
To write it down.
This is like a welcoming of this energy coming in. Welcome it. We all have our own way of opening the door into new ideas, new friendships. We go to parties sometimes and we really don't feel like being there, so everyone senses it about us and avoids us more or less.
Yeah.
We go to a party to meet people and we're friendly and we're effusive and outgoing. People come to us, don't they? Well, this energy is community seeking almost.
Right.
Because the split consciousness causes you to regard each other as units, separate units.
And we're not.
And you're not, no.
No. Because thought creates things.
Yeah, well, we're talking about a supercharge of the same thing coming to us.
How very marvelous.
Well, I wish I could share unified consciousness with you guys and have wished that for a long time. And this is as close as I can come to being able to share it with you. So I hope you enjoy it because it has its own purpose and it has its own defining moments. So enjoy it.
I already have a Word document open and the title is The Return of Electric Consciousness, December 21st, 2012.
Well, that's how you may see it. Electric consciousness is, it'll be like how we perceive an electric or charged feature or manifestation of something. That's exactly how it'll be. I just hope that we see people that are under the weather, having a head injury, or even being in comatose. We see this making a difference there. I don't know that it will to someone in a comatose state, but it could. It could be that little charge that brings them into consciousness.
Almost like when the heart gets shocked back into life. This is a similar thing, but with the mind.
Yeah, I don't know that it will do that, but we may see it. We may see reports of people that regain consciousness when they're thought to be hopeless. We may see this because a lot of times it doesn't take much to bring a person into consciousness from a comatose state. People don't realize that until you hear these stories about when they wake up, they can remember people talking to them. That were talking to them when they were in comatose state. So they couldn't have been that far away, could they?
No. It was just something that was preventing them from actually reintegrating in a conscious state. I always believe
that there's something to do with the will in that.
Yeah, you said this before. You always said to me, it is the mind that chooses whether or not to stay with the body, but particularly within drowning cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is a belief in metaphysics and in arcane knowledge and even the occult that drowning cases can be recovered.
If you read that doctor's book that I read, which was just mind-blowing, seriously fantastic book, his experience proves that without a shadow of a doubt. His body was just a shell, but his mind was not. He should not have been able to, going on all of his educated experience as a neurosurgeon, the part of his mind that was affected should not have been able to experience anything whatsoever. But it did. And it experienced the whole. I really want to buy you a copy of that book and send it to you, James, because it is such an amazing read. When I read it, when I finished the book, I felt his ache, his longing to be back where he was. And the fact that he was, in a way, although he was pleased to be back alive and survived it, there was very much a part of him that ached to still be where his mind was, and will always do so. But it gave him the knowledge that this is not it. This is just a ridiculous charade compared to what really is.
Well, you have all near-death experiences acknowledging that. They realize, first of all, it isn't my time. And this is the first thing. When they come back, they realize that they come back because they're sent back.
Yeah.
They may not put it in those terms, but they know that. And they know it changes them, and usually for the better.
Such a large number of Americans, due to the wars, so many people have been recovered from death and had these near-death experiences that changed their lives. So there must be quite many in America, probably only for that purpose, to instill this knowledge into humanity.
You haven't heard of any near-death experiences lately in America, have you?
No, actually, I haven't. Why is that? Mind control.
No, it's worse than that.
Really?
They're killing them.
Why? Why don't ask the inevitable. You know the answer to that before you've even asked the question. Yeah, they don't want us to know, do they?
They do not want us to know what these people are coming back to say.
Yeah. This documentary where people were interviewed and they had numbers, how many people there were already. Like 5% of all Americans.
It's very high, because this is the most important place to affect the needed change for the species to survive. This is a primordial mechanism, and just think, what hand is sending these people back with this important information to help the species survive?
Hand of God.
When you sit down and you think about how these people that are in the driver's seat of all of this have been lacking in any kind of perspective with respect to morality or with respect to taking a very moral and unambiguous stance towards the monsters that are talking about depopulation and all kinds of other monstrous plans in the wings, then, that identifies them. You're identified as much by your enemies as by your associates and friends, especially in times like this where everything is drawing together. If we set these people back where they can't do what they've intended to do for 60 years, what they've planned to do for 60 years, this will be their defining moment, because if they don't get it off this time, I don't think they'll have the following that they'll need to even think about it later on. Because most of the people that are involved with them are power seekers themselves. And there is no power in being set back by a few. And what they want to do goes against nature, goes against genetics, goes against design. Can it succeed? No. It can cause a lot of damage to a lot of good people, can harm them, can put them through a period of terror. And that's what we're trying to prevent. We're doing our best to discourage that from happening, because it won't benefit anyone. And it will cost this lineage. People are not satisfied to have spent a lifetime, in some cases lifetimes, then to lose all memory and all benefit of it due to the machinations of these animals. And that's what they are. When you haven't developed anything more than a lust, whether it's for money or what, power, then you're an animal, because that's not using the faculties that actually create joy and wisdom and anything good.
And we are short on joy and wisdom, very much so on this planet. However, little things bring joy, but overall, we're short on planetary joy, let's put it like that.
Yeah, we're short on community.
Yeah.
We have all these people, and we have no community.
No. Partial manifestation. So much more I could have said about partial manifestation. Your words, not mine. Don't forget, I copy everything you say and write it down where I can make little notes underneath it. So tell us more.
That's a way to prevent you from doing anything harmful to your neighbors. That's just about the gist of it right there.
I'm trying to get a simplistic explanation whereby not only will I understand, but I will then be able to explain it to others. Because when I try to explain to people what partial manifestation is, I don't have a full understanding myself, so therefore I can't give them an understanding on their level as well. That's not to be condescending at all. You can't start talking about these things and expect people to completely understand what you're talking about. It takes a series of conversations.
You have to understand the elements that go into making full manifestation. And when you have an imperfect set of these conditions, it's not difficult to make it possible to erase that manifestation in time if it's injurious to innocent people. It's injurious to the continuum. It's injurious to itself.
Okay.
Partial manifestation is exploiting a series of events that don't conform as strictly to the continuum as they might. And once a hydrogen bomb was detonated, the safeguards that are put in place through this continuum askew for the purpose of, when the decision is made, shifting this to a non-dimension.
Trying to wrap my mind around that.
Well, it's difficult. You don't have an astrophysicist that could.
No. On a very, very childlike basic level, it would be like...
Just remember John Donne?
Yeah.
There are so many things that go into approaching this. I like to approach it from a metaphysical model, like Donne did with uniform field theory. That's the best way to do it, because the elements that go in to make a technology that could deal with this just don't have any background at all, firm or not, in astrophysics that are known and applied here. And linguists can determine how peoples migrated from one area to another by studying their language and their permutations. Today, that concept is totally ludicrous, but to go a step further, it's ludicrous in the universe, too. Sentience is so rare that the likelihood of it emerging strictly unique in an entire universe is absurd. Somehow this was a gift of something that happened so incredible that we don't have the minds to conceive of it. I don't. And then it spread. And it could have spread so many different ways over time and events. They have a smattering of idea of the extent of how even to build a perfect model of time, what time is obedient to, and then what's above it all. What has given design to everything?
A designer. If there is design, then there must surely be a designer.
Sure, and there is. Once you stop and you realize how stupid it was, as late as the early 50s, to focus on bilateral evolution, where all of the races evolve separately. You ought to just see how absurd that is, right off. And then to carry that to the universe. All came from one place. All came from one place. Sentience came from one place. That should bind us all together. All men are brothers, right?
Well, you'd like to think so.
How many religious works, how many philosophical treatises have dealt with that and said the same thing? Where do they get it from? If you stop and think that as we see dolphins and gorillas and other animals showing empathy and trying to express what they see in us, how in the hell can you say that if they had sentience, they didn't get it from us? I'm not saying they couldn't. I'm saying, but we would be the father of it to them.
Yeah.
And who was the father of it to us? And on and on and on.
And on, yeah.
It can come in a light. It can come in data carried by a light wave that hits a cell structure in the zygote at a particular time. I know that sounds unlikely, but in a period of infinity practically. How many times could it happen? It could happen many times. A thing that is adequate to the tasks has a way of establishing itself. And then when it's harmonious to its environment, it does so very rapidly.
People don't like to be different. It takes a very, very strong moral character to turn around and say, you're wrong.
Well, they don't have to do that, but what they should be able to do is keep from having their mind entrenched into the same mindset as their masters.
That's what I was trying to say.
And some do, or some really do. You see people coming forth when it's suicide. And when it's dangerous for their loved ones and so forth, you can't expect them to. That's why people like us are so important, because we offer them support.
That knowing that somebody else already knows what they know.
Yeah.
So they're not on their own.
That's right. We give them a forum. As a matter of fact, they don't have to be identified. They can bring forth information. They can get in touch with us or people that are in touch with us and say, yeah, well, you're not 100% correct with what I know. Let me tell you what I know, and so forth. And so we all advance together.
Now, would this incorporate a growing global consciousness within humanity's awareness?
It could.
And what happens when it gets to a certain tipping point, a nexus point of sorts?
What you would have, there are 2 or 3 possibilities. One of them I kind of don't want to see, but that I've seen elsewhere. But you want a healthy sense of outrage to emerge, in which people decide once and for all they're going to do something about it. That's a healthy sense of outrage. Then you have the chaotic reaction, which is you have a extreme sense of outrage that, just like you saw during the French Revolution. And then at the end, when people are exhausted from their executing everyone that wears a powdered wig, then they exhaust into feelings of guilt and remorse and allow the same shit to come back because it's disguised as a savior, i.e., Napoleon Bonaparte.
In other words, nothing is completely resolved to an agreeable degree. It's where ambivalence comes back in and we fall back into the same old pattern.
The institutions are left untouched. And what did Napoleon do when he came back out of exile the first time? He resigned himself to the empire. He had declared himself emperor, but when he was deposed, when he was exiled, he came back for the 100-day empire. And then he was very flagrant about being emperor. And it was almost like he was under mind control because his extravagance exceeded what the people that had supported him coming back would tolerate. It was like he was pushing his limits. Then he was put in exile for the final time. His heirs carried on. And they carried on by supporting the nouveau riche, and what was left of the aristocracy soon reestablished itself.
Yeah. If you leave one rotten apple remaining, it will infect the rest eventually.
Yes, it's not so much a matter of being vindictive as it is taking those that are going to oppose you and then try to reinstitute what you have taken down, re-educating them and letting them know that the slightest move towards reconsolidating the evil we ripped away from you, the slightest move, and you die. Would things have a tendency to return to the old over time? Yes, unless you change the people back to where they should be. Not to add something that they haven't known that isn't part of their lineage, but to bring it back, to give them what they need to be wise. And that's the secret. Of course, you have to take away from the few that have prevented this and have hidden truths, important truths that change could be hinged on. What we're doing is that we are providing a theater in which change becomes possible.
Yes, because at the moment it isn't possible. There are pockets everywhere, but there never seems to be that gathered momentum which really eats into the problem. And I am now convinced it is because of the gravity wave problem. If that is rectified.
It's going to be rectified for a little while. I'm going to tell you something, Torz.
Mm-hmm.
In a collective, and you have a collective, you don't have a community, you have a collective. You have a collective of varied interests, varied intentions. There isn't enough common focus for people to affect change. And the reason for that is mind control, plain and simple. The media controls public opinion. It fashions it. And when people get too far away from what they're used to, they get increasingly uncomfortable until they center back on it. And this is part of the programming that has been instituted. Have you ever known anybody that would watch the same episode of a program on television over and over again, laugh just like they'd never seen it before, and could hardly wait until they could see it again?
All too often.
That's centering. And this usually occurs when they have been pushed a little off center, and they want to get back into that. And so there are things like seeing a program that is not challenging in any way to get them back into the flow of this centering where they feel comfortable because they were threatened with a new idea that threw them off that. There are two things that people cherish when they have the complacency of split conscience. Just remember, in a split conscience, the conscious mind is constantly trying to shunt out or suppress the unconscious or subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind knows this is all wrong. The subconscious mind knows that this is counterproductive. The subconscious mind knows not just when you're lying to other people, it knows when you're lying to yourself.
Yes.
And it's at war with that. First of all, we have an instinct, an ingrained instinct, whether we have split conscious or not, to protect our lives, because that's just the initial step towards protecting the species. And one thing that's common to all sentience is preservation of the species. That's in common with all sentience, of all people everywhere at any time. We want to protect and survive our species, and we will lay down our lives to do it. We will lay down our lives to protect children because they represent to us the species. They are the hope for continuation of the species, and we will do it instinctively. Very few of us won't react instinctively to save the life of a child. And that's part and parcel of sentience everywhere, here, everywhere else. It's what makes sentience so wonderful, one of the things. But here, so much is clouded and confused, and we don't really believe in all of the things that make a species capable of persevering its own self. We're lost in this confusion. Many of us are willing to buy into this depopulation shit, because we do not know of the possibility of how far the earth, if wisely used, can produce food and health and benefits for the people here already, and even more.
Because we are constantly broadcast mind controlled by the mainstream media into believing the exact opposite.
Yes, you are made to believe that the health of a nation is represented by how the stock market did over a trending period. You are made to believe that if certain corporations fail, it'll be an economic disaster for you. And nothing is further from the truth, because it will affect change to your benefit. Reorganization of corporations does not harm the individual unless the individual is getting paid by that corporation. There isn't a corporation that has been on the face of this earth that could have been a benefit to humanity across the board at any time. They will, on the basis of profit-taking and the way in which they are hostile and antagonistic to competition, become an enemy to the public at large anywhere and everywhere they ever are. Period. Not that I don't think that free enterprise is important, but corporations don't want free enterprise. I can tell you how many ET civilizations operate, what they have. If you want to call it an economy, what they have is very interesting, and they find their own ways. Of course, after things get going, everything changes to accommodate new colonies or whatever. And I shouldn't say colonies, because a colony connotes the type of colonialism that you have had here, where you go in and you crowd other people.
Not if you spent years reading science fiction books. It doesn't. It means something completely different to me.
That's right. That's right. You're talking about people taming regions where, to begin with, they do very firm ecological studies to make sure that their presence won't endanger the ecological balance.
Yeah.
Then, if there is any signs of sentient life, that's explored very carefully. And it's up to that sentient presence if they are to be allowed to come in. And if that sentient presence says no, that's honored, because there will not be any kind of infringement on populations elsewhere. There's no need to. You know, I've always said that there was life on Mercury. And in the face of it being so close to the sun, everyone had believed for so long that it was superheated and that would be an impossibility. Well, if you read Kevin Smith's email that he sends out once a week, the latest one, he talks about scientists having found ice on Mercury. Now, doesn't that tell you something? Just remember, when I was trying to point out when a massive CME headed directly for Mercury, an EMV wrapped itself around it.
Yeah, and protected it.
And protected it.
Speaking of ships, what about my little sighting earlier on this evening?
If it had been closer, you do carry a cell phone with you. You could have taken a picture of it.
It was already dark, which was why it was quite so stunning, because Jupiter was the only visible thing in the sky. It's almost like 10, 15 minutes when it's gone dark, but the stars are not out yet.
Yeah, that's a window of opportunity.
Well, there you go. I had a window of opportunity, and I was given something quite incredible, actually.
Yeah.
And it was, literally. I was putting the shopping away, and I stood in the back garden looking east towards Jupiter, because it is incredibly bright and really, really large just as it's going dark. And I took the front of the house, came back, walked into the garage, and then came back and stood and looked at it again. And I won't even call them stars, but they look like stars. Jupiter's really bright at the moment and really big, and they were half the size of Jupiter, a thumb's width from tip of thumb to knuckle. If you hold it up in the sky, a thumb's width apart from each other, and they were very, very far away. As far as I could tell, they weren't in our atmosphere at all.
Maybe we'll hear something about this, because that's very prominent. Of course, back when I first started seeing some really incredible things that thousands of people in the area could not avoid seeing if they didn't have psychic blocks on. But today, there are fewer people with those psychic blocks. And it's amazing, though, how few people are awake enough to see the most fantastic of things.
Well, this was amazing. There was no denying that it was not an aircraft, because these two moved consecutively with each other as if they were part of the same craft, one light on one side, one light on the other side. They moved together. There was no separating. There was no getting closer. One didn't move further than the other one. They moved down and to the right towards the horizon very, very, very slowly. So slowly that you wouldn't know if you weren't looking at them. They didn't move a long way. They moved a very, very short distance and then just blinked out.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt that those were either very large, very anomalous ET craft, or they were EMVs. They could have been EMVs. I'm not aware that they were EMVs, and sometimes I am. I think these were probably ET craft who were making themselves known. A lot of times this is done to demonstrate the presence, to say, hey, we're here, we're watching, we mean well,
It happens to me a lot. As soon as it goes dark, I tend to stand outside the back and I just stargaze. I've done it since I was 4 or 5 years old. And only a few months ago did I see something quite strange out the back as well. But I don't see it as strange anymore because my way of thinking is just so different to other people that I know who just don't have open minds at all. I spoke to a friend this evening and I said, "Did you see my status?" He says, "Yeah, but I wasn't going to ask you about it because I have my skeptic's head on." And I said, whoa, hold on, just back off a minute. Why? Is it really so hard to believe that when you know me, you've known me since I was 5 years old, when I tell you exactly what I've seen, and you know that I've spent years and years and years looking at the sky, do you not think that I would know the difference between an aircraft, a star, and what I saw tonight? And he said, "Well, yeah, I suppose I can't argue with that one." I said, "No, you can't." I said, "So just accept what it was that I told you and let it just sit and grow." Because it was not a craft of this planet. It was out in space.
I'll bet we'll hear some more witnesses.
I don't know. It was a very, very short time. Very, very short time it was visible for.
You can bet that there are a number of people right now that are using 6-inch and maybe even 8-inch Meade telescopes with cameras and everything that are looking for signs. Now, it's just a matter of whether or not they are involved with the space agency or whatever it is that happened to be looking in that direction at that time. But I'll guarantee you somebody saw that. It's just whether or not they're going to disclose it. One night I saw something, and the next night Kevin was staying with me, and he saw a large craft, and he saw it, and then he saw it just shoot out of sight straight up.
Yeah.
And so he said, "My God, man, I've never seen anything like that." And I'd pointed out to him these planes that freeze in the sky going straight down. And he had seen those. So, and then I took him out where Copeland's was, and then I showed him where if we went out there late at night, he could see Mothmen. Well, I would say we had a good chance of seeing Mothmen. Usually between 4 and 3 in the morning was when I would come across them. But, you know, I can, if they're in the vicinity, I can communicate with them and maybe bring them up where Kevin could have seen them, but Kevin wasn't interested in that.
The books mentioned in this conversation are Night of the Last Cartoon by the Mayan elder Actar, available on his website spelled actah.com. The other book is Proof of Heaven, A Neurosurgeon's Journey into the Afterlife by Dr. Eben Alexander. The time given for the arrival of the energy is 10 p.m. GMT or UTC-0 in the night from the 21st to the 22nd of December. We wish everyone a happy journey.